All right, everyone. I'm excited for today's podcast because the title of the book that they co-authored together really got me, How to Speak So Your Kids Will Listen. And I'm like, oh, what does that look like? Since I now have a toddler who's forming opinions and having big emotions, and sometimes it's, they scream and you want to scream too. And you know that that's probably not the most productive thing to do. So I'm really excited that I have two parenting experts here with me today. I have Joanna and Julie, and they have co-authored two books together. And like I said, parenting experts, how do you even become a parenting expert? Like all of us are parents, right? And it's like, but I'm no expert at it. So I'm so glad that I have you here today. So I'd love for you two to tell us a little bit about yourselves first, and then we'll get into how you wrote this book. And Joanna, if you want to go ahead and start, we will dive right in.
Okay. Well, I was raised by this woman who wrote a best-selling parenting book called How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk. So I grew up really being listened to, and I thought I was pretty good at communication skills. And before I had kids, I was a teacher in a West Harlem elementary school. I taught bilingual special education, and I practiced my skills on real live kids. And I told my mom all my stories, many of which made it into her next book, which is How to Talk So Kids Can Learn. And so I felt that, when I had my own kids, I had it made. It's in my blood. I have to practice. It's going to be easy, easy peasy. And then I found out that, oh, this is 24/7. You don't get to come home from this job. It's kind of relentless. And so I kind of, kept my head down and did the best I could. I was in this parenting group, but I hadn't told anybody that of my parentage, because, who wants people talking about you behind your back when, your kid bites another kid? They're going to be saying she was raised by a parenting expert. Why doesn't she know what to do? So I kept it on the down low. And then one day, one of the parents in my group showed me this book. And she said, Joanna, you'll love this book. Really, it sounds just like you. It's just your style. You've got to read it. And I looked down, it was my mother's book. So I had to shamefacedly admit, like, my mother wrote that. And she yelled out to the whole group, hey guys, Joanna's mother wrote this great book and she never told us. So thus I was outed. And after that, one of the moms asked me to give a talk at her church. And then everyone was very enthusiastic about doing a parenting workshop. So I did my first parenting workshop, and it all spiraled out of control from there. So that's how I ended up walking in my mom's shoes, which I want to say large shoes, but they're only metaphorically large. They're actually the same size as mine. And at one point, my childhood friend, who I've known since I was 10 months old, Julie King, calls me up. And I'll just toss the ball to her.
Well, yes, I want to go back in time to say that Joanna and I met when we were babies, literally. We lived around the block from each other, and our mothers became very good friends. And we went to nursery school together. In fact, we went to all the way through high school together. But while we were in nursery school, our mothers studied the work of Chaim Ganot, and they would experiment on Joanna and me and our siblings. So you could say that we were really guinea pigs for this whole approach. And fast forward, Joanna's mother, as you heard, wrote a series of best-selling books, which I read as a kid. And I even got to copy edit one of their books. I think I found a comma out of place in their book called Siblings Without Rivalry. So I like to say I contributed to that book too. And then we graduated from high school. We went in our separate directions. I actually went to law school and practiced law very briefly before I started having my kids. And in those early days, I was only working with parents of little kids because that's what I had. I didn't want to presume to know how to talk to older kids when I hadn't done it myself. And the parents were very enthusiastic about this approach. They were very enthusiastic about the workshops that I was doing. And they said, we want more stories and more examples for just little kids. So I actually called up Adele, Joanna's mom, and I said, I have your next book. And she said, oh, Julie, you write it. Call your friend Joanna. You guys write it. So I called Joanna and I said, we have to write this book.
And
And
I said, no, 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 we're not writing a book.
she
But
said, it's already
Julie
been
was,
written.
she was very persuasive. I guess she had her law degree, you know?
Right? So it took us, a lot of years. But we did, but that book came out in 2017. That's how the first book came out. So she and I were doing workshops. I ended up moving out to California, but we were doing workshops at the same time on opposite sides of the country and comparing notes and sharing stories. And after our first book came out, we got a lot of feedback from our readers, which was really exciting and very cool. And we had readers all over the country because I'm sorry, all over the world. The book has been translated into 28 languages. So we were hearing from people from so many different countries, and they loved the book and they had more questions. So at one point we thought there's so many questions, and maybe we should put this material together into a second book. And that's how our second book. So our first book is directed just at kids ages 2 to 7. It's called How to Talk So Little Kids Will Listen. And our second book covers a wider age range, and we call it How to Talk When Kids Won't Listen: Whining, Fighting, Meltdowns, Defiance, and Other Challenges of Childhood, which are a lot of the questions we were getting from our readers.
And we use these emails that we got from parents from Russia, from China, from France, from Germany, and we put some of the letters into our book, and we made it a kind of a Dear Abby sort of section where we actually answer the letters, and then we get answered from the parents to find out what happened when they took our advice. So that's sort of an interesting part of the book. And people said they wanted to practice this approach. So we put little quizzes in the book and exercises for them to practice. And we also printed stories that readers sent us from all over the world. So it's nice melange. And I just want to throw one more thing in our first book, which I'm proud of. We have a whole section about parenting kids who are on the autism spectrum or have different sensory issues, which Julie knows quite a bit about, having raised 2 kids who have some of those issues and having given workshops specifically to parents who are facing those kinds of challenges. So in that way, our book has some, very new and fresh material in it that diverges from the foundational material.
Yeah, that is nice, because you do hear, I mean, nothing is one size fits all. And so there could be like a lot of resources if maybe my kid is a little more high needs or has some sensory issues, and then it's hard finding that material that really does apply to you. And so that's great that you guys were able to include that in there.
Yeah. We got a lot of happy readers who said that they were happy to see themselves in those stories too.
Yeah. Well, I love that the title, well, how you're just saying kind of the How to Talk So Littles will listen, ages 2 to 7, because my daughter's turning 2 this week. So when you reached out to me, I was like, yes, please tell me how to talk so that my daughter listens. And she's so good at communicating. Like, she's speaking very well. She communicates very well. But from like the time, I don't even remember what age, if she does not want to listen to you, she'll be like, hey, Jovi. And she's just standing there pretending like you don't exist. Like, hello. She's like, I know I'm gonna not want to hear what they're saying, so I'm just gonna pretend I don't hear anything at all.
So I'm not the only parent who has been asked, have you had your child's hearing checked? Because not even the littlest blink, right?
Right. Like zero acknowledgement, like just, you do not exist. But I know so many parents, I mean, going through any sort of parenting journey, you know that your kids are discovering life, right? They're learning emotions, they're learning how to express themselves, how to communicate, they're growing up, and it is so much. And they're just tiny, almost like tiny adults, right? You, as adults, we have emotional days, we have not great days, but you're kind of expecting your kid, like, you need to be on point every single day. And that's just like not realistic. And so we've all been through phases where your kids aren't listening, or where they're blatantly like, you're like, hey, can you do this? And they're like, no. So every single person listening to this podcast, this isn't like new information. This isn't like what your kid said no to you. Every single parent has had their child say no to them or has not listened to them. So I know that this is such a topic that applies to everybody. So I'd love if you guys could just share a little bit of information. I might be assuming completely wrong, but it seems like the theme with most people that I've talked to on here is like, when we're talking about our kids or getting them to listen or just learning different things, a lot of the work is actually with us. Not like actually bending your kids so that they break and they listen. It's like, wait, maybe I'm talking in a way that my 2-year-old's brain is just not receiving it. So I need to make some changes.
The question is, how can I engage the cooperation of a 2-year-old?
There you go. Right.
Rather than how can I bend them to my will?
Right. Right. Exactly. And it's easy when you're not a parent to be like, oh, my kid's never going to do this thing. And then you have kids and you're like, wow, I'm very humbled.
They're doing that thing.
Right. But now they're doing that thing in the middle of a Mexican restaurant in front of a bunch of people. And you're like, oh, I am that person. I am that parent.
You're on stage.
Right.
Yes. So
Welcome to parenthood.
Right. So I'd love for you guys to maybe just, without giving your entire book away, just share like a little bit of those things, tips or whatever you want to call them, that really do help to get our kids to listen, or ways that we can change. I mean, is it like a voice tone? You know what I mean? Like, or is it like
a
method?
We'll give you a little introduction to
There you go.
how we think about that question. When I first started doing the workshop, a friend of mine said to me, so why do people come to your workshop? And I thought, that's a good question. And I thought, well, they see the title, How to Talk So Little Kids Will Listen. And I realized, oh, what they're thinking is how to talk so little kids will, behave. They'll do what I say. We use that word listen euphemistically, don't we? So we're not just wanting them to hear the sound and have the sound wave go into their ear, right, and be translated by their brain. So one of the first ideas that I like to offer people is that there's a connection between how kids feel and how they behave. When we're talking about listening, we're talking about behaving, right? And so if we want to make it more likely that they're going to behave, we really need to pay attention to how they feel, right? Because there's that connection. In fact, if you think about it for yourself as an adult, as a parent, reflect back on those moments when you're glad that you weren't on Zoom being recorded with your kid, right? We've all had those moments. Maybe it happened when we had a rough day at work and tech kept falling apart, or we had an argument with our spouse, or we didn't get a good night's sleep last night, whatever it is. We all have those moments when we don't handle a moment when in other times we might have handled it with more grace, right? Because there's a connection between how we feel and how we behave as parents, and it's true for our children as well. So if we want them to behave well, it helps if they feel well. And how can we help them feel better? Well, one thing we can do is to accept their feelings, which, sounds so simple when I say it like that, but can be really challenging to do in the moment. Like, it's easy when the kids are having feelings that we are happy for them to have. Oh, you're excited about your new baby brother. You love the Lego you got for your birthday. That's so wonderful. I'm so glad to hear it, right? But when they say things like, I hate my baby brother, send him back, right? We want to say, oh, that's a terrible thing to say. He's a member of the family. We all love each other, right? Or when they say, I didn't want Lego for my birthday. I wanted blocks. And we say, you should feel grateful you got anything, right? Can you hear how we are actually denying the feelings of our kids? Very unlikely that in that moment, a child is going to say, I should love him, even though I feel like I hate him. Oh, okay. I didn't realize. Thanks for letting me know, right? Mm-hmm. So our intuition is often not actually helpful.
So I think that one of the reasons it's so hard to acknowledge negative feelings is we're worried about amplifying them and magnifying them. So if a kid says, I hate my brother, give him back, we don't want to stir that up even more. We want to say, no, 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 that's not nice. We don't feel that way about our brother. But what will actually help your child calm down and feel more accepting of his or her little brother is to counterintuitively accept that feeling and say, oh, it's not easy to have a baby in the house. They're always crying and touching your stuff. And sometimes it's annoying to have a little brother around. And then it's soothing and it's comforting to have someone, acknowledge your inner reality. And that's actually the bridge that can bring a kid to, sometimes it's fun to play with him, and sometimes you'd rather be the only one again. Here, come sit in my lap, big boy or girl. And, or if a kid says, oh, I didn't want this, these blocks, I wanted Lego, if we tell the kid, that's, ungrateful little brat, maybe you'll never get presents again. It's not going to change their feelings. But if we say to them, oh, that's disappointing. You had it in your mind that you were going to get Lego. You were looking forward to that. That will actually help them get to, oh, well, what can we do with these blocks? When you deny a feeling, it becomes more intense. You shouldn't be ungrateful, but I didn't want them. It's no fair. My friend got them. And what we're doing at the same time, I think you mentioned this, is we're teaching them, we're giving them a vocabulary of emotion. So we're teaching them words like disappointing and frustrated. It's frustrating to have a baby brother, grabbing your stuff. So they're becoming, emotionally literate. And what researchers have found is that kids who are spoken to in that way have tremendous advantages. They get along better with their peers. They get along better with their teachers, with their parents. They do better on standardized tests. They have better immune systems. They get sick less. I'm just saying this because people always want to know, the science behind it. And to top it off, they even tested urine of these kids, and kids whose parents use this emotion accepting approach had fewer stress hormones in their urine. So we like to tell parents, forget about all that other stuff. If you want your kid to have superior urine, you should acknowledge their feelings.
That's so interesting on the scientific level that, just even the stress hormones was detected in there. Cause it is really easy as a parent, especially when it's constant, like you're getting into this phase. Well, at least I am, like just recently within the last couple of weeks, like she's just having so many big emotions, and it's like, and now we're going through this. She's turning 2 and she's still nursing, and I'm trying to wean, but I feel like I need to comfort her. Her 2-year-old molars are coming in. She's,
oh God,
like
so much at once. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And then she'll like be like, I need booby. And I'm like trying to set these boundaries around it. And then it's just like, there's just some days where you feel like, wow, there was a meltdown in the morning over this, and there was a thing over this. And it's so hard to come from that, because then like as a parent, I'm getting up with my 6-month-old and I'm tired, right? I'm tired. I am physically tired from nursing 2 children and being up in the night and doing other things. Like I just feel like I'm giving so much of my body, my time, my energy. And so to be in this place where I'm like, sometimes you don't want to be like, I know it's hard, honey. Sometimes you want to be like, stop crying, stop whining. Like, I know that you want this right now. Like, but
you can't have it.
Right. I haven't eaten yet today. And if I don't soon, I'm going to be melting down. So I like stop. So it's like so easy. You can see now, like being a parent, like I said, before you're a parent, parenting looks easy.
Yeah.
My kid won't do this. I'm going to handle it like that. I'm going to be so patient all the time. My kids aren't, ever going to bite another kid. Who knows? And then you become a parent and you're like, oh,
Oh, that's what they were talking about. So I just want to give you one of the tools from our book just popped into my mind when you were talking about, I want these boobies. One of the tools is, instead of saying, well, you can't have them, I have explained it to you. So stop. Is you can give a child in fantasy what you cannot or are not willing to give them in reality. And you can just tell them, oh, you wish you could have those boobies right now. You wish you could have those boobies anytime you wanted them. And you can give yourself in fantasy. You could say, I wish I had detachable boobies so that when I'm tired and I want to eat, I could just screw one off and give it to you. And then you can help them move on with a choice, so, what can you have instead? Let's look in the refrigerator. You want a piece of apple or you want a little bit of, suck on a juice, whatever a few grapes, what would satisfy your desires? But you can start by giving it to them, giving them in fantasy. Give yourself in fantasy instead of saying, what many parents would say, well, you're too old for that now. That's babyish. And that's just going to make her feel bad about herself and rejected. And, these things all come into our head. I went through that same long, elaborate discussions about my boobies with my 2-year-old. So it really brings back sometimes. But I mean, we can't always do this. And one of the lovely things about this approach, I feel, is it's a very forgiving approach because, there's going to be moments where you say, just stop. I'm tired. I need to eat. You're going to, and then you can say, well, that didn't end well. And then you say, next time I'm going to say, oh, you wish you had my boobies all the time. I wish I could take them off and give them to you. And you get endless do-overs. You don't have to worry that your kid is never going to misbehave again or never going to do something, upsetting again. You'll get another chance.
Yeah. And I want to highlight also that sometimes parents, you'll notice that in Joanna's example, or this issue of the boobies, we're not actually giving in to her, right? Because parents will say to me, well, if I acknowledge what she wants, then she wins. And I say, we don't have to actually give her what we want. We can acknowledge what she wants at the same time that we say, I can't do that. And that, I think that can be a real relief to parents who feel like, if I acknowledge that she wants something, aren't I being cruel to not give it to her? And I'm like, no, because you have needs too, and it's so totally valid to say, I hear how much you want it and I can't give it to you right now.
When we give a child in fantasy, it makes it easier for them to accept the reality. And in my case, my child's reality was making boobies out of those little orange caps in the Tinker Toys. So we moved on to playful solutions.
Yeah. It's definitely hard, learning, where and how to set boundaries around different things. Even like food, for example, we definitely limit how much sugar our almost 2-year-old gets. She doesn't, but she has tasted ice cream before. So now she'll be like, I want ice cream. And it's not something that we have every day. It's not something that we have every meal. And so, I feel like the tools that you're giving, it's like, oh yeah, ice cream does sound great right now. Would you like this or that? We're not having it right now, but whatever. It's hard to figure out in the moment, what to say without having some of these tools in your pocket, because otherwise you're just yeah, well, we don't eat, ice cream for breakfast usually. But
Yeah.
Ice cream's so tasty. Don't you wish it were good for you? Don't you wish you had a mother who said, you have to eat up all your ice cream or you won't get your broccoli? That would be nice, right? A mother who said, clear your plate, finish that whole bowl of ice cream.
Right. Oh my goodness. But I mean, without like having some of these tools, it is hard to know how to respond in these moments, especially your first time around. And I feel like also with your first kid, you realize everything you're doing wrong and
Yeah.
some of maybe what you're doing right.
Oh,
But
no.
even when I was talking with like my parents, my siblings, everyone says that they're kind of usually harder on their first kid. You
Yeah.
learn as you go. It's almost like your first kid is your
You
experimental
practice it.
child, and you don't want them to be. I'm like, I don't want you to be an experiment. Like but I am practicing different things, and you
Yeah.
definitely learn when you're getting it wrong.
Yeah. Like with the ice cream thing, I think a lot of us have this tendency to think, well, I'll just explain to her about health and sugar and why we can't eat it all the time. And then she'll know. And so she'll accept it. And then we try that out. And I'm pretty much guessing that your 2-year-old didn't say, oh, I didn't realize. Okay, thanks for letting me know. Let's have that broccoli and, you know, whatever. So, of course, we're going to sometimes say those things. And then when we notice we don't get a good response, that's when we can think, I wonder how else I could handle this. And we can tap into, we know what it feels like to want ice cream. I mean, very few, I know very few people who don't like it. So I mean, we can relate to the, ooh, that does sound good. I wish we could eat it all the time. We can't. Let's see, what else could we have? So yeah, I think we do sometimes learn we test out certain approaches, certain responses, and when they don't work, that's when I would encourage parents to think, well, how else could I respond that might be more helpful?
Yeah. I feel like those moments are more difficult, like I said, when it's like the end of the day.
Yep.
You're, exhausted. One kid's crying, the other one's crying. You're trying to get dinner ready because that's always when it happens, right? You're cooking dinner, everybody's melting down. Maybe my husband's not home yet. Because usually once he like walks in, I'm like,
Here, they're
and
yours. They're your
yeah,
children.
he's awesome at doing that. Like if I'm like cooking or doing other things, like he's watching them and entertaining and playing with them. So it just seems like it always happens at the same time. And then it is sometimes hard to like regulate yourself as a parent when just the stresses of the day or getting things done. And then on top of that, like the baby's fussing and then your toddler's screaming at you because she wants something. Yeah. Ice cream, boobs, something. And then you're just like, oh my gosh, like, how do I stop and like respond in a gentle manner, like versus like being like, just stop crying. Like, I can't take it anymore. Like, right now, like, you need to stop so I can breathe. Like, then we're almost like putting our like how I regulate myself is how my child acts. And I know that we can't put that on our children. Especially being the adult in the situation, our job's to help co-regulate with them, not expect them to co-regulate with us. So it's just like these situations, I find myself having a hard time being patient or offering other like I always try to offer different options when it comes to boobies when I'm setting boundaries around it. I wouldn't mind if she just nursed to go to bed, like that, and we got to a place where we were there and then she got sick and then my daughter was born. So it's just like, now the molars and potty training, it's like, I can never stop. So just like setting those boundaries, but it is hard to like stick to them because I want to get back to just sticking to those boundaries that like, okay, before bed we can do it, not right now. And I always offer a snack, a drink, something else, but it's just like the end of the world. And then at the end of the day, it's hard to be like, okay, like I'm going to fantasy it or play other options. It's just like, oh my gosh, just stop.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're bringing back memories. You were talking about trying to get dinner with the two of them, and before, I had a friend who asked me if I wanted to have a baby shower when I was pregnant, and I said, you know what? what I was worried about was really not the things. It was how I was going to get dinner. And so we actually had group of friends of mine came over, and we just cooked a lot of meals and put them in the freezer. And then after the baby was born, I had such a hard time just remembering to take it out of the freezer. I thought, what has happened to my mind? I'm not even having to cook dinner. I just have to take it out of the freezer and put it in the microwave, and I can't do that. I was like, oh my God, I'm not holding it together, you know. And I just think it's a lot at the beginning. And when you have a baby, it's so constant, and the waking up at night thing. But and when they got a little bit older, when that, of course, those supplies ran out eventually. I eventually did remember to take them out. I always wanted to have dinner planned by lunchtime. I thought, if I have to think about it when I'm tired and they're cranky, that I can't do it. It was really hard too. So you're bringing back memories, and the importance of us taking care of ourselves. I mean, that's really what you're speaking to, is doing everything that you can to get yourself your basic needs. In fact, after my third child was born, Adele, Joanna's mother, called me at one point, and she said, "How's it going?" And I said, "Well, I'm able to meet my basic needs." And she said, "Oh, so you're eating breakfast, taking a shower?" I said, "Shower, not a basic need. Breakfast, a basic need." And I was going to bed when the baby went to bed. If it was 7 or 8, that's when I went to sleep. And my husband was in charge of the other two. I have 3 kids. And gradually over time, I was able to do more. But when we don't have our basic needs met, that, as you say, that's when we can't think straight. It's really hard to figure out, what do I say or do? How do I manage this?
Yeah. Yeah. I just realized when you're saying that I haven't really been taking care of my basic needs, because I'll end up like not eating breakfast, and then I'm like so cranky. I'm like, oh, I've been up for 5 hours and I have not eaten. No wonder I am so stressed out right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
We are not so different from our kids.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
I get hangry just as much.
We talk about, we have a chapter about meeting basic needs where, no skill will suffice if a child is overtired or hungry or overwhelmed emotionally. We have to deal with those basic needs first, because otherwise they can't function. And sometimes it's a real poser as to how to get our own basic needs met when you're in a situation like that. You've got the toddler and the baby and no helping hand. And, that may be a time where you just say, "Hey, watch Sesame Street." We don't want our little kids in front of screens all day, but I've got to take care of my basic needs. And then you're going to have a calmer, happier mother.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I usually revert to that. Like if I'm getting dinner ready and my husband's not home, I'm like, okay, we can pick something to watch for a little bit while I'm just finishing getting dinner ready, so that I can let me get this in the oven, and then
because that really is the crazy hour for the kids too, because they are starting to get hungry and tired, and they're smelling the smells, and if they don't have something really engaging, I mean, if you're feeling up to it, you get them doing some kind of activity, some kind of dinner hour activity that completely absorbs and engages them. And I remember we had a hook from the ceiling with the bouncy seat attached to it, and that's where the 6-month-old went, and we put stuff under his feet that he could kick and stomp on. And we had the older kid was in charge of putting stuff under his feet that he could kick and stomp. So they were doing that, while I was making dinner for a while. And then when they got a little older, they were all on chairs, trying to stir the pots. And it definitely made food prep more complex. But they did, all 3 of them, grow up to be quite the cooks and have made us a lot of meals. And, starting pretty young, so it was worth it. But yeah, that's a tough time of day when everyone is depleted. So you'll gather your little best activities, and sometimes it will just be a screen, but hey, you got to be kind to yourself.
I also became a big fan of crock pots, because you can throw it in the morning and then forget it for the rest of the day. That's more my style.
Yeah, I try to remind myself of that, because even today I got this brisket a while ago, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to make it today. So I left it out in the fridge overnight to defrost. And then today, all the recipes I'm looking at, it's like marinate overnight. And I'm like, okay, well, I wanted to eat that tonight, so that's not going to happen. Like when you look at a recipe and it's like dinner time and it's like marinate for 3 hours. You're like, okay, never mind. Like this just isn't happening.
Scrambled eggs and raw carrots. There you go. There's your dinner. You got protein, you got vegetables,
There you go.
and you got a piece of whole wheat bread.
Perfect. That has to be dinner sometimes because it's like, yeah, it's definitely a lot. I know you guys, in your books, you talk about just effective communication strategies that work. And I was wondering if you could just give us like a couple of tips. I know we talked about just acknowledging your kids' feelings, maybe doing some like fantasy. What are maybe a couple other strategies for our listeners?
Yeah, we talked about the feeling side, but we still need to get them to do things that they are often completely uninterested in doing, right? So
like brushing your teeth, you know.
You would, you might not be surprised to know how many hours I have spent talking to parents about how to get kids' teeth brushed, because it's a daily ritual. And the kids, if you look at it from the kids' perspective, they're like, I did it yesterday, I did it the day before. They don't look dirty to me. Like, why do I have to do this? It makes no sense especially to a 2-year-old. My go-to, my favorite tool that we have in the book is to be playful. And sometimes when I offer this as a tool, parents will say to me, oh, I'm just really not the playful type. I don't even know what to do. Like, I want my kids to be
tired.
Right, I'm tired. So we have a lot of ideas in our book of how to be playful with little kids. And I'll share one with you that was one of my favorites that worked really well with my kids, which is to make an inanimate object talk. So instead of telling your 2-year-old, it's time to brush teeth, don't run away, come back here, open your mouth. And then have you ever tried prying open the mouth of a 2-year-old? Not very easy.
You don't have a hand left over to stick in there with a toothbrush, right?
That's right. So you can have the toothbrush talk. I feel so lonely here. I'm just hanging out. I want to see your teeth. Suddenly, a lot of little kids who refuse to open their mouth are like, look, and they're opening their teeth. And then, you can also tell stories. I used to tell my son, my oldest, when he first went through, I think all kids go through the I don't want to brush my teeth thing. I told him, you know what? I heard that all the zoo animals have escaped and they're hiding in kids' mouths. Should we look in yours and see if there's anything in there? Suddenly, of course, he's like, what do you see, Mom? So I'm brushing his teeth. Oh, I think I see a giraffe. Wait, there's an elephant back there. Oh my gosh, how did the butterflies get in? That sort of thing. Suddenly, night after night, he's like, what do you see? And of course, we branched out to like, did you bring sand home from the playground here? I think I see a little bit of blueberries for breakfast. Grandma's glasses. No wonder we couldn't find them. They're in your mouth. So he wanted to know what I was going to find. So he would open his mouth. So if we can be playful, that's a great way to engage our kids' cooperation. We can use it for toothbrushing. We can use it for getting kids into the car. Is that an issue sometimes when you're trying to get her in? And have you ever tried the elbow technique? You try to get them because they won't let you buckle them in. The car seat can be calling them. I need a tushy. I'm too cold. All kinds of playful. And Joanna, maybe you want to add some.
I just want to add that, sometimes, people say, well, shouldn't my kid do what I say because I'm saying it, because I'm telling them to do it? Why should I have to jump through hoops? And, I do believe that play is the way children learn and the way they interact with the world. That's kids' medium. But we also ask parents to think about, how would you feel if someone started rapping out commands to you? And, how would you feel if I walked in and said, look at that mess you made. You need to pick it up, every little bit of it. Now get your coat on, hurry up. If you keep playing with your broccoli, you can forget about dessert. All of a sudden, I think we're feeling pretty defiant and resistant. When we give a person an order, we get pushback. It's the natural reaction. So we're really working against ourselves when we rap out commands. Nobody likes to be ordered around. So, yeah, and sometimes we even throw in a threat. We like to call it a natural consequence. If you throw rocks one more time, you're going straight home. The problem is that a threat to a spirited child can sound much like a challenge. And what the child hears is not the whole sentence. What the child hears is, throw rocks one more time. So we don't want to work against ourselves by stirring up, rebellion in their little souls. And, the highest goal we're reaching for is to make kids feel cooperative, because that's really 90% of the battle, with any human being. So, one of the things we do is simply give a kid a choice. We can give them information like, ooh, rocks can hurt people. You can throw leaves, or you can throw your foam ball. And, in the case of my spirited child, he might look at that choice and just say no. So my second go-to would be to put the child in charge, which kind of sounds insane, but we're putting them in charge with parameters. We give them the information like, ooh, I can't let you throw rocks. Rocks can hurt people or break things in the house. What can you find to throw that would be fun to throw, but is soft enough not to hurt anything? Now, all of a sudden, your child is engaged. They're looking around. What can they throw? And now you can sit back and relax, because now your child is doing the work. Can they throw a paper plane? Can they throw tissues? So, we want kids to learn responsibility. And this is a way of teaching them responsibility, giving them little small instances in which they can be in charge and think for themselves and come up with solutions. So those are just two of the many tools that are in our book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is there ever, because a lot of people listening do have little kids, but some have some older kids. And let's say they haven't really implemented this style of parenting so far. So now they have a 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old who it's just a constant battle. Is there like, do these types of things, I guess, work with kids that age? Or is that kind of like a completely different approach?
Ever so much more so. Ever so much more so. So if your kid comes home and says, I don't want to do this homework, it's too hard, I've been sitting all day in school, and instead of saying, denying the feeling, oh, it's not too hard, if you just sit down and get to it instead of complaining about it, it would be over. What kid now sat down and said, oh, now that you've explained that, I'll get right to it? They don't. Start with acknowledging feelings. Homework, it's such a pain in the neck. I wish you wish they would abolish it after a whole day of sitting in school. You don't want to have to sit down again and do more homework. Let them talk, reflect their feelings. And then you can say, you can give them a choice or put them in charge. You could say, what's the least painful way to do it? Do you want to do it while eating a snack? Do you want to get it over with right away? Do you want to, go outside and run around a little and get your energy out, and then do it while I'm making dinner? Do you want to, I remember one parent said to her daughter, do you want to do it on the table, or do you want to do it under the table? And this kid, who had been, phenomenally against the idea of taking pencil to paper, was under the table. And she, went right under and did her homework. So, there we are talking to them about taking responsibility for their homework, really, essentially. But we're not starting by fighting them and dismissing their feelings and making them feel angry now, not just at the teacher, but at the parent. And I'll let Julie talk, because I'm sure she may.
Well, I was just going to say that we have a whole chapter in our new book, How to Talk When Kids Won't Listen, has a chapter on homework, amongst many other topics. And so there's more to say about homework if people have that issue. And it's a pretty common one when kids get older, because I don't know of any kids beyond like first or second grade who are like excited to come home to do homework. So I think it really helps for us to change our mindset around what we're trying to do, rather than that we're trying to force our kid to do this thing they don't want to do, that we are on their team, that we're on their side. Yeah, this, if it were up to you, I used to have a little fantasy with my daughter, boy, you can design your own school. I have a feeling that there wouldn't be much homework. Oh, there would be no homework. She loved to fantasize. This is when she was older. Her school wouldn't start till 11, I think. She'd get to school, There would be one subject, and then there would be lunch, and then there would be recess. I believe there might have been art or something, and then that would be the end of school and no homework. And she loved to talk about that before she actually got down to doing her homework. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can kind of, it's not basically ever too late.
Oh, never
Start
too late.
incorporating new strategies. But
I've
I
worked
mean,
with parents of adult children who
Mm.
are saying, you know, I didn't do this with them, and I'm changing the way I talk to them now. It's never too late because all people want to be accepted for who we are. We all want to be understood. And that's sort of fundamentally what this approach is about. It's not we have no limits, but I can understand what's going on for you and what you I'm looking for ways to meet your needs as well as my needs. So it's a very respectful approach.
And that lays a foundation for a child who now knows how to care about other people's emotions or needs. Because when we say to a kid, why did you do that? Think of how bad that must have made your friend feel. You hurt him. Well, if we've never put any value on their feelings, they're not going to be very inclined to put value on other people's feelings. So this approach is very much promotes perspective taking and peaceful solutions that respect everyone's needs, respect the parents' needs, respect the child's needs, come up with something that works for both.
Mm-hmm. Before we wrap up, I just have a question for maybe situations that are dangerous or life-threatening, like your kid's not listening and they're just trying to they're sprinting off from you in a parking lot. They're trying to run across the street. They don't know how to swim and they're running toward a pool,
Yeah.
Like it seems like maybe that's a good time to yell at your kids, but I'm not sure. Stop,
Yeah.
obviously they're not crying in that situation, but you're trying to get them to listen. Do you have any strategies for those types of situations?
One of the skills in the book, one of the tools in the book is simply take action. And of course, if you're in a situation where the big one is pummeling the little one or somebody's heading for the street, your first thing to do is yell to grab attention and then grab your actual child. We're not going to sit back and start talking about feelings under those circumstances. And I've had to do that and, struggle a screaming, kicking child to the car that I had to grab who was running away in a crowded area, which had me terrified. But, then what happens next is important, because we can then talk to the kid, you didn't like it when I grabbed you and yelled at you, and I was so scared that you were, running for the street. I don't feel like we can go out, and if I don't know that you'll be safe, what should we do next time? And parents have come up with all kinds of solutions with their kids. Whether it's, play that we're for little kids, we'll pretend we're elephants in the parking lot and you'll hold my scarf and pretend it's the elephant tail, to you'll hold the end of the cart and you'll lead me to the car and I'll follow you. One parent played a game with her child called Freeze Your Feet because she had a new baby and a 2.5-year-old, and she felt like she couldn't go anywhere anymore because he would bolt. So they practiced in the house. They would practice he would run around like wild and she would yell, freeze your feet. And it was a game and he would freeze like a statue. And when they went out, she would say, remember the freeze your feet game. And they would do that when they went out. And if he couldn't, because he was 2.5, then she would put him in the stroller, not as a punishment, but as a way to take action and keep everyone safe. So she didn't say, you bad little boy, but she said, I have to put you in here to keep you safe. But she felt that she could go out again now that she had that little tool set.
Yeah, that's good. Because like I said, it sounds like if they're bolting for the street, it's hard to.
Yeah, we're not going to have a conversation in that moment.
Right, exactly.
My mom actually told me that the one time she hit me because she was told, that if your child runs for the street, does something that dangerous, you need to hit them because it's a matter of life and death. And she said that when I was very little, I ran for the street and she grabbed me and she gave me a swat and took me inside. And the next time we went outside, I went right back for the street. I was angry. I was headed there. So she was like, oh, that didn't work. So I guess there was a different conversation about running towards the street, or maybe, a different expectation of, how near the street you can let a 2-year-old play. But the hitting just inspired defiance. And of course, once you go to physical punishment and it doesn't work, the recourse seems to be harsher physical punishment. And we have certainly both, I think, had parents in our groups who were subject to harsh physical punishment as children. And there's so much negative fallout from that in other ways that they don't want to visit it on their own children. And there's, of course, mountains of research about that as well. So, you can stop a child from doing things by really harshly physically punishing them, but you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So these gentler methods will achieve the same results and not have the collateral damage of creating a kid who is angry and is hitting other children and feels disconnected from the parent and is having trouble in school, and a whole host of things. There's so much research on it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. For those listening, where can they get your books at? And if they want any more information or to work with you, where can they find you?
Our books are available wherever books are sold. The two titles are How to Talk So Little Kids Will Listen and How to Talk When Kids Won't Listen. And if people want more information about my work, they can go to my website, which is my name, julieking.org. And if they want to know about what Joanna and I are up to together, they can go to our website. It's How to Talk with dashes in between the words. So how-to-talk.com. And we have information about workshops there. I work individually with parents. I have workshops based on both books and more available there. We do speaking. We have blog entries on our joint website. So we have lots of information and resources available.
Come visit.
And we're on Instagram, which is, oh my gosh, what is it, Joanna?
I don't know.
How to Talk for Parents. I'm not really a Instagrammer, but I'm learning. And we're on Facebook, Faber and King. So we can be found in social media as well.
Awesome. Okay, I'm just making notes here so I can include all these links in the show notes, and so people will be able to connect with you easily. I just want to thank you so much for coming on, for giving your expertise, telling us about the work that you were doing, and hopefully giving parents just some tips to try to communicate with our kids. And I know everybody's doing the best that we can. And our goal is, parenting is a job that doesn't stop. So you don't really get breaks during it. But it also gives us opportunities to take situations and, that time that we yell, be like, okay, how can I do this differently next time? Because I know that just screaming back at my child is not the most effective thing to do in the moment. So how can we learn and grow and want to nurture our children, acknowledging their feelings and they are human beings as well. We all want to be acknowledged. So I love the information that you gave, and I was really grateful for your time and energy and to be able to connect with you today. So thank you so much again for coming on.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thanks for having us, and good luck with getting dinner tonight.
Thank you.
Take out.
Awesome.